All right, everyone. I think we'll get started. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. I think we've got a really exciting session. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, you are as well. Partly, I'm excited because we actually have two of our customers who are using Orchestrator today that we're actually going to go in and really see what it takes to deliver a full solution using System Center with Orchestrator. So that's excellent just to be able to see that kind of solution. My name is Eamon O'Reilly. I'm a program manager on the Orchestrator team within System Center, so I work on the engineering side. And with me today is Ryan Endorfer from General Mills. And then Bhaskar Narayanan is going to come from Office 365 and show what they've done inside of Microsoft to really leverage System Center with Orchestrator and deliver on some of this self-service work that we've been talking about all week. All right, so the agenda today is basically three things. I'm first going to start where I'll just talk for a few minutes just to kind of give everyone an overview of Orchestrator capabilities. As you know, we had an acquisition of Apollos about 2 years ago, and we've been working to bring that into the System Center family since then. And so I'm actually excited that we can actually deliver it as part of System Center 2012. So hopefully everyone out there is actually going to get a chance to use it now, and you'll see some of the improvements we've done along the way. We're then going to hand off, and Ryan's going to talk about what the work they've done in General Mills with SCCM just to enable a lot more simpler package requests so that you can actually deploy those to their end users. And then Bhaskar is going to come up and go through the Office 365 work they've done with dedicated SharePoint and some of the automation and self-service capabilities they've delivered by really leveraging Orchestrator with some other System Center pieces. So I think the two key takeaways from today is, the first is we really want to deliver self-service IT, because once you start to get into that mode, your end users actually start to see that business flexibility and on-demand capabilities of what they're looking for when they actually look for IT to deliver capabilities. And so we're going to talk a lot about how do you actually start to deliver on that self-service promise, and you'll see two of the examples as they go through them. And how that's done with System Center 2012 is, you might be familiar with a lot of the other components, but Orchestrator is really the piece that we've added that enables all these things to happen. And it really takes place in three ways. One is we have the ability now to do integration across all the different systems in your environment. So no matter what you're doing, you'll be able to integrate to those systems, then Orchestrator control how those tasks happen within inside of your system, and then at the end, you'll be able to automate that. So then you can actually get to that self-service capability. All right, so I talked to a few of you just as you were coming in, just to get a feel for what you guys were looking for today. But I think I'll just ask everyone, how many are familiar with Orchestrator today and have used it? Excellent. So awesome. I think it's about 2/3. And just, first of all, I just want to say thanks to everyone who's tried the beta, tried the release candidate, given us feedback. We had a lot of tap customers. And just getting all that feedback in really allowed us to kind of deliver on 2012 RTM as a really solid product based on that feedback. So I appreciate everyone who's actually tried it out and given us feedback. So the thing to think about when you're using Orchestrator is, what are some of those tasks in your environment or those processes that are actually difficult to do, are time-consuming, are manual tasks, and how would you actually go about trying to bring those processes or tasks into a centralized place so you can actually ensure they're consistent, repeatable, and then they're on demand. And so you want to start thinking about, maybe there's some simple tasks, like when an event happens, you can collect the logs, you could parse those logs, try to do some remediation, and then actually close it out. So that's some of the simple things you could do. Or probably everybody's seen challenges around, well, how do I patch a SQL cluster and all the dependencies that go around with that? So again, by using Orchestrator, you'll be able to control how that patching might happen on a SQL cluster. And so those are some of the things you might do with inside your own IT department to actually see efficiencies and actually deliver on some automation. But really, you'll start to see, once you get used to using Orchestrator, you can actually start to think across your entire enterprise and start thinking about incident management, change management, VM lifecycle. How do all of those things take place in your organization? And what Orchestrator really allows you to do is connect up all those pieces and start to deliver on some of those higher level functions you want to see in your organization so that your end users can consume them on demand. So I want to talk for a minute just for how Orchestrator works. So when we built Orchestrator, we really identified 2 users who would consume the Orchestrator capabilities. And so the first of those users is the IT professional, which probably a lot of you are in here, which is basically doing those day-to-day IT tasks to make sure your data center, your IT organizations are running efficiently. So how we target that was we actually built the designer that enables you to actually describe all of your processes inside of that core designer. And how we built it was it enables you just to have activities that you drag over, connect up your systems, and it's really built through forms-based authoring. So you're not writing code to these, you're literally just connecting up activities through forms-based. And so it's really designed for that IT professional to be able to describe these runbooks and then automate them. The second thing user we went after was, okay, you've got all these runbooks, you're automating a lot of your tasks, how do you make sure they're all running the way you want them to in your organization? And so we built an orchestration console that really targets the operator whose actually job is to make sure the health of these runbooks is what they expect. And so it allows you to troubleshoot through the orchestration console what were the inputs to the runbook, what was the outputs of the activities, what was the overall result, so that operator actually can make sure that everything running in your organization, so again, it's not a bunch of PowerShell that's running around, all of that now is centralized into this one view so the operators can actually go and maintain the health. The next one we target actually is the developer or that IT professional who might be used to writing PowerShell or some C#, or people who are more familiar with some technical aspects of actually integrating into other systems. And the idea behind this, we've actually built a really rich toolkit in Orchestrator that once you actually describe how to connect to different systems, they could be from other vendors that you want to connect into, or they may be some homegrown systems that you have in your own organization. You actually can describe how to connect into those systems and how to manage them through our toolkit. And the real benefit of that is once someone invests that time, they can actually then package that up into an integration pack and then publish that into Orchestrator. So now every IT pro who comes in will actually see that integration pack and those activities, and they will use it exactly the same as they would any other activity that would be in the box or you got from a partner. So again, that idea of authoring, you invest in this one place, and then you can reuse it across the board. So we've seen a lot of our customers leveraging that, and it's something to look at if there's a system in your environment where you actually don't have something to integrate with. And then the last user we looked at was, everybody wants to know, is my investment I've done in this automation really paying off? So you want to be able to give the visibility into, well, how many runbooks are running? How long did it take? How do I project how many there's going to be in the future? And so the way we built Orchestrator, we built this OData REST web service that allows Power Pivot, if people are familiar with that in Excel. You literally can just point to that web service, and it pulls in all of the statistics out of the database. So you can run a bunch of reports and graphing to really understand, is my investment in Orchestrator and the rest of System Center paying off the way I expect? And so that's another capability that's actually very easy to hook up and get that results. So I know I talked a little bit about the 3 tenets of Orchestrator, which is that integration, then you do that orchestration, and then finally you get the automation. So those are the 3 things to think about of the capabilities of Orchestrator. But the first one of those is really the most important, and that's the integration part. So without integrating into those different systems, you actually can't perform any of the rest. And so there's a lot of investment we did into enabling you right out of the box to be able to integrate to a lot of different systems in your environment. One of the first of those we did was all of the System Center 2012 components actually have integration packs that are available right now, so you can actually connect up to anything in your environment and actually start to orchestrate and build runbooks based on those. But we also have integration packs, so if anyone's running existing versions of System Center products, we also have integration packs for those. So you may have OM in your environment, but you may move to another System Center 2012 component. You'll actually be able to talk between all those systems and deliver on some of those tasks you might want to do. The second category of integration packs is what we call our inbox IPs. And there's dozens of activities right out of the box when you install the designer that allows you literally to drag and drop inside the designer and connect up those different systems and automate the tasks. So those can range from file management, text management, or perhaps you just want to write some PowerShell, do some XML parsing, or you can also, there's an SSH activity. And so that will allow you to connect into your Linux systems if you needed to. So there's a lot of power that comes right out of the box that you can use with our built-in activities. But I think one thing we learned after talking all with the Apollos customers and more people like you is, every single organization usually has multiple management systems they're using. They're not always all from Microsoft. You've got other things in your environment, or you've got some homegrown stuff you use. And so we've actually delivered some third-party support from Microsoft that you can actually get right now related to the VMware. You could get IBM NetCool if you're using it, some of the HP products. So if you actually have those in your environment, you can seamlessly integrate and connect up as well, so you can deliver on some of these solutions. But beyond that, we actually have vendors and partners as well that are actually delivering additional integration packs. So perhaps you may have BMC. I saw Dell released their AIM integration pack this week. So there's lots of partners out there who are delivering additional integration packs that you may have in your organization that you could just plug right in. And the benefit of plugging those in is that then that IT professional can just use those just like they would any other integration pack or activity, and they'll be able to connect up in a seamless way. Beyond that, we actually have a healthy community of customers delivering integration packs up on our Codeplex on Microsoft. And the idea behind this is if you actually do build up one of your own integration packs, you can push it up there so for others to use, but you can also download what's up there and actually leverage those in your own environment. And so you'll see ones up there perhaps around SharePoint integration, Team Foundation Server, perhaps F5 is in your environment, all these different types of systems you want to integrate with. They're available up on Codeplex. You could download, extend them, and contribute back if you need to. So I want to spend a slide. How many people here have used Apollos or are currently using it? Awesome. This kind of slide was built for you. So when we acquired Apollos, we spent a lot of time actually talking with our Apollos customers, understanding what their needs were, and getting feedback into how we could actually make Orchestrator better as we rolled it into the System Center 2012 product. And so a lot of the features I've added in here, there's a bunch more that I didn't put on the list, but these are the ones that we really got a lot of feedback on. And so anybody who's tried installing Apollos before, we've completely done the installer experience, so now it's very seamless, just like the rest of System Center 2012. And this will support sysprep installs. There's a document up on TechNet that you can use to actually deploy any way you want. Some of the other investments we've done, if you've ever looked at trying to test out runbooks in Apollos, you actually had to test each one individually. We've now actually invested in Orchestrator so you can test the entire runbook end-to-end with inside our runbook tester. We've also heard a lot of feedback around how do I keep my passwords? Where's all my encrypted data supposed to be stored? And customers today would actually store those into databases or files and then try to bring those in when they needed them. Inside of Orchestrator now, we've actually extended the variables in Orchestrator so you can keep that encrypted variables directly inside the product and then leverage those in your runbooks as you want. So it allows you now to centralize some of these usernames and passwords that you'll need in your runbooks. So there's a lot of feature improvements we made as we try to bring it into 2012 based on the feedback. But as you know, once you bring something to Microsoft, then there's a whole amount of work because we want to make sure when we release it as part of System Center 12, it stands up to kind of the rigorous work that you guys are going to do with it as you start to deploy it. And so we did a bunch of more work around bringing up the latest security technologies in Microsoft into the product. We did make sure that it was globalization support was fully available now so you can deploy it on any locale you need. And a bunch of other what we call common engineering criteria. And this talks about support for IPv6, fully qualified domain names, VSS writer support, all of these core things that every server product in Microsoft goes through, all of those are now available in Orchestrator. So I'd really encourage people who are using Apollo to take advantage of that and bring forward. As well as we've delivered operational stuff like management packs, best practice analyzers as part of the release. So it's one of those things you can actually take now, deploy, and you get all of the existing capabilities you'd see with other server products in Microsoft available through Orchestrator. So that's kind of the capability of what Orchestrator can do. We've had other sessions where we've gone deeper into all the different capabilities. I just wanted to give you an overview of how customers are using it today. But the meat of the organization of today's presentation is really about seeing how they're used in the real world. So what does it take to actually build a full end-to-end solution using Orchestrator and some System Center products? So this is where I'm going to hand over to Ryan, and he's actually going to go through the work they've done with General Mills and give you a flavor of what actually is possible when you start to invest and leverage the investments in Orchestrator.
Testing. Is it on? There we go. So, as Amy said, I'm going to talk about one of the solutions that we've built internally at General Mills utilizing Orchestrator. How many people were at this session last year? All right, a fair few. So for those of you who weren't, we presented last year on a solution that allowed users at General Mills to upgrade themselves from Windows XP to Windows 7 using SCCM. One thing that we quickly found as we were doing this is that people do not appreciate being upgraded if they don't have their applications. So our end users wanted to move to Windows 7. Because of some security reasons, we actually do not allow users to install software on Windows 7. We run in low in a low privilege environment, which presents quite a challenge. We only have roughly 1,000 of our 3,000 identified applications packaged inside of SCCM. So 1 out of 3 packages that are in there, we're trying to allow our users to upgrade themselves. You can see the mismatch. And oh, by the way, traditionally, if you want to get something packaged inside of with our packaging team, your turnaround you're looking at is 2 to 4 weeks. So you got this great solution. They can go at any time to upgrade themselves. But oh, wait, if you don't have an application that you need packaged, you have to wait up to 4 weeks. Not exactly the ideal solution. So what we wanted to do was design a new process that would allow us to kind of tackle those 2,000 applications that we don't have packaged yet. And of course, just like everybody else, we're not going to get additional headcount to go out and do that. So we wanted to design a process that more people than just our packaging team could use to really help us dig through these 2,000 additional apps. And to that point, we wanted to design an automated process they could use. And kind of detailed out 3 different pillars. It had to be simple. Again, we're not targeting our packaging engineers as the primary users of this application. They do use it for some stuff, but they're not our primary users. Our primary users really don't know a huge amount about how to package an application, don't know a huge amount about SCCM. So really wanted to design a process to kind of lead them through that and abstract as much of it as we could. We wanted it to be quick, 2 to 4 weeks. It's a pretty long turnaround to tell a business person, sorry, you can't have Windows 7 for 4 more weeks, even though we just told you a week ago you could have it tomorrow. So we really wanted to design a system that we could get these things turned around quickly in. And it had to be consistent. So if we're going to make an automated process, everything has to be consistent for it actually to have any chance of working in the real world. This is an important point. This process is not replacing our traditional packaging. We have enterprise-wide applications that we spend a large amount of time engineering, make sure they install silently, install well. But what we're really targeting with this is the 2,000 applications that traditionally we haven't had time to look at. Usually they have a small user base or some other reason. But if it is a large user base or there's a complicated installation, applications do still go through our traditional packaging process. But for really the simple applications, we're just letting them go with a few less touches. So what did we actually use to do this process? We use System Setting Configuration Manager. It's kind of the workhorse. It's where all the applications are built. 2007 R2. We use Active Directory, so we do user-centric application delivery at General Mills using System 2007 R2, which means we've got collections with Active Directory groups inside of them. For this process itself, we utilize VMware vSphere. So during the process, you guys will see this, we actually deploy a virtual machine as part of the request process for people to install the software onto. And then we deprovision it. That's using VMware. The UI, you guys will be familiar with how it kind of looks if you were at last year's session, is yet another Silverlight web page. Really kind of looking maybe in the future to replace this with a Service Manager or SharePoint type interface. But for now, it's another one of the Silverlight interfaces that just does database queries.
And you could use VMM as well with Hyper-V. You don't have to use VMware.
We're using VMware. And then the last bullet point is what actually ties all these things together, what actually does all the work, and that is Orchestrator. So you've got a UI that's making database calls. You've got Orchestrator that's reading data out of that database and actually orchestrating CM, Active Directory, VMware to create the end-to-end packaging process. So just a quick thing. So this is how we actually deliver software at General Mills. So you've got your end users going in to run advertised programs to run applications that are assigned to them, advertised to them. You get that by having a collection with an Active Directory group, and they're inside the Active Directory group. So that's kind of the stack of things that we need to build. We need to build a bunch of stuff in Active Directory, a number of things inside of ConfigMan, and then at the end of the day, it'll show up for end users inside to run advertised programs. So what does this actual process look like, and what are we going to run through in a demo here in a second? It's split up into 3 different modules with somewhere around 9 different large workflows tied behind them. And the first module, again, targeted at a wider audience than just our packagers, is our request module. So people upload source files, select the installer, install it on a VM, and go on with their day. We then have a licensing step. If you're talking about 3,000 apps that haven't been looked over by a licensing team, they're really happy that they get a chance to actually look over these and say, hey, this actually isn't legal in a corporation. Let's not do this one. So we have a stop point there. And then finally, after the licensing people approve it, we go out and our deployment guys have a UI that shows them, hey, which distribution point should this go to based on the initial membership, allows them to push it out to those distribution points, and then finally, once that's done, create the final advertisement, which allows it to show up at the end users run advertised programs. So that is what we're going to demo here. So without further ado, and this year I don't have backup slides, we're going to actually go out and package the Orchestrator design console. So wish me luck.
It was actually funny. We're actually, was it yesterday? We're deciding which package should you actually go through. And Ryan's, they've done so many already in General Mills, we're actually trying to find one that would make sense. And then Ryan says, couldn't we just deploy the designer that's with Orchestrator? And so he just grabbed it, and just within that, he just started using it. So it's kind of impressive.
Yep. So here is our illustrious user interface. I actually think it would look better inside of a service manager, inside of some other tool. My strong point probably isn't UI design, but it's workable. So the idea is any one of our requesters can go out to this portal. It senses that they're in that role. They can go over here and say new request. All right, so it's now actually made a new request for us. It's going out and running a Orchestrator workflow that's going out and provisioning us a virtual desktop for this purpose. So if I flip over to my Orchestrator environment, I will show you what that actually looks like. So how many people are a little frustrated by the runbooks they've seen that have like 3 objects in them? I'll tell you from personal experience, I haven't written any that have 3 objects. Most of my workflows have quite a few different pieces to them. That's actually a design principle. So we try to break things up into smaller pieces so that we can reuse them in other workflows and that they're easier to test, right? So if you have a workflow that does a whole conglomeration of things like building all of this stuff, you want to break it into little pieces and test each piece individually and then kind of string them together. So we have here is kind of our top level workflow for provisioning a VM. You can see that there's 2 big things that we're going to do, well, 3 big things. First off, we're going to go out and figure out what VM should I have. We've got a database that says, hey, we've got this pool of VMs, which one's available? So we go out and figure out which one I should use for this purpose. Step 2 is actually going out and talking to VMware and saying, hey, go out and snapshot this virtual machine so we can snap it back later and undo the install. And finally, step 3 is updating the request stat, which kicks to the web page's UI and makes it go on to the next step. But kind of as a design principle, if you look up here, we've got step 1, step 2, step 3 trigger policies. Underneath the folder over here, you'll see step 1, step 2, step 3. All right, so if I look at my runbook right now, it's somewhere in step 2. If I want to see what it's actually doing in step 2, I can expand that little folder right there, click on step 2, and it's actually finished step 2, but I wanted to look at the log of it. It goes out and shows all the things it just did. So it went off and it snapshotted the VM. It added the user to a bunch of local groups, entitled the user to the pool, and then finally powered on the VM. And if I look at vCenter, we can see that it actually did create a snapshot of the virtual machine I'm about to go access and use. So if I go back and put on my my requester's shoes, all that I've seen is a web page that's updated a little bit, and it's changed its feel a little bit. And I'll have the upload files control enabled. Go out and click that and browse to the actual source files of the application I want to package. So we're going to do the Orchestrator run book. Goes, uploads it to the web server. And now I have a human decision. I've got to go click on the installer. So if it's a whole bundle of things, we're not trying to dynamically figure out what the heck that installer is. Hopefully, the requester can figure out what they would have clicked on if they were actually installing this themselves. So I set that as the executable, and that'll be the executable for the package. Then I say deploy files to VM. So now what it's doing, it's got that bundle of source files and a little wrapper that we have for this process up on a file share somewhere. It's copying all that stuff down to that virtual machine. And once it's on that virtual machine, it'll tell me that, hey, you can go connect to that virtual machine now. So if I go back to my Orchestrator environment, we called this deploy software to VDI. And again, it follows a very similar format. We've got 3 steps that we do. Copy software, create a desktop shortcut, and then set it to install software, which updates the UI. And I got to drag it or dig into each one of these and figure out what it does. So if I go down to create desktop shortcut, what this does is just update the request and runs a little script. So this brings up a good point. So there's a fair amount you can do with built-in objects or objects you built yourself. It doesn't preclude you from actually writing scripts to do things as well. Some things are better suited as scripts. Some things are better suited as integration packs. It depends on how reusable what you're doing is. If you find yourself doing something against ConfigMan all the time, probably should go into an integration pack. If it's more of a one-off, I need to create a shortcut on this random desktop, maybe it's more appropriate to use a script. That's kind of an internal decision you guys need to make in your own workflows. This workflow should have completed. Yep, it's switched on to the second page. Now I go out and connect to the VDI that was provisioned for this process. On the desktop, it's created a number of shortcuts for us. The important one is this application test. This application test just goes out and runs our little wrapper based on what the people have selected inside of that UI, kind of mimicking what run advertised programs will actually run. So I go up here and say run it as administrator. Yes, I know administrator is not system. There's a few differences there. But for the purposes of testing it, that's what we're going with. And it pops up the little wrapper that we have. And because it's an MSI, it figured it out that it can just do /QB. So this is actually going to be a silent application install. There we go, it installed. So I go down here, and the idea would be that our requester would then test the application as much as they can to make sure that it actually works. Great, it looks like it's launched up. I can go back to that web page. I click on a little button that says load, add, remove data. And look at that, there was one new thing added to add and remove programs that corresponds to what I just installed. And I'm going to go down and say use that to determine what my package name should be, what my package publisher should be, my package version. Again, they're not typing this stuff in. It's standardized. We're just going with it. Whatever the vendor called it, that's what we're going to call it internally. No choice, just go with it. And so that whole idea of standardization, yes, it may not be that pretty, but at least it's consistent with what the vendor calls it, which makes reporting and other things simpler later down the line. So I go down, save those details. I scroll back up, and I've got a wonderful licensing page. So we've got some licensing questions that our licensing folks ask us to answer. So this isn't related to the Windows 7 upgrade. It's a new software piece. It was actually no cost because we're under contract. So we go down here, and we say, is software contracted? Yes. Save my licensing data. Plops them into a final review page that I get to say, hey, here's all the stuff that I've done. Here's all the stuff I've updated. If I need to add a work log note to our licensing people, I can go in here and say add work log entry. And that'll get persisted in some later views that you guys will see. And finally, if I'm good with actually submitting this, I can go down here and, hey, submit this request. And now what's going to go out and happen, if you can't guess, is it runs yet another Orchestrator workflow. This time, the purpose of the workflow is to go out and grab all of the changes that I've made to those source files, if I've made any, that little bundle of stuff, bring it back up to our package directory, as well as unprovision my virtual desktop and put it back into the pool. So I go down here to staging stage complete. In a moment here, this should start kicking off, but that's what it's going to do. It's going to get the request details, copy the resources from the virtual machine up to the parent machine, and then unprovision my virtual desktop. Actually, look at that. It already happened. So we're down request details. That was quick. Copy resources up, and unprovision the VM. It's actually still running, but really, as far as the requester is concerned, they could care less when the VM is finally unprovisioned. They can go on with their life. It's good at that point. So now I'm done with that first module, right? So the request person is done. They can come back and do more requests if they want to, but the stage has changed to licensing, which means our licensing folks need to go out and take a look at it. They've been sent an email to go out and look at it, and it's on our licensing page. You can see there's a few things stuck in our licensing state. Licensing people like to rain on to things if they can. It's an ever-going challenge to get them to release. But we can see my new one, and I know it's okay, and I've gotten permission to actually approve this one. I can pull it up, and it pulls up all of those details that I had entered before. So it goes down here. Again, we use Active Directory to actually put users into the group. And it pre-populates an Active Directory name just based on the name of the package. Right, so we pulled out the add remove programs data for this package and said, hey, it's called Orchestrator Runbook Designer. So we pre-popped a name called Orchestrator Runbook Designer. But guess what? That's too long. AD names have to be under 64 characters. So it's popping up here and saying, hey, licensing people, you got to go out and change this. So it's under. So I'm just going to go out here and call it SC 2012. And that should actually bring it under that character limit, so now it's all good. We could put in descriptions and notes on the actual Active Directory group that would actually cause them to be added to the Active Directory group when it gets created. And put in the group owner. I'm actually not the correct group owner. I'm going to put it to one of our licensing people. If I can spell her name right. There we go. And then we go all the way down here, and they've got a little button that I love when they push called Approve Request. All right, so now the request is approved. So now that the licensing people have approved the request, all of the real building magic happens. So now we're going to go out and actually build all of our distribution stacks, both in Active Directory and in Configuration Manager. We're going to do that with Orchestrator. So if I open up Orchestrator console one more time, well, not one more time, yet again, and go to staging or licensing stage complete or something, create stacks. You can see what we do. We go out and create the Active Directory stack. After our Active Directory group is made, we go out and create all the stacks inside of Configuration Manager. So what does creating the Active Directory stack actually look like? 3 steps. First off, we look and see if the group already existed. If the group already existed, we're just going to reuse the group. If the group doesn't exist, we go out and create it. Right? So we look it up. If we find the group, we just move it to the correct OU. If there wasn't an existing group, we create the group in the correct OU. And then finally, after the group has been created and replicated, we finish and return to the next step, which actually goes out and sets all the different properties on the Active Directory group. So we set the group description, the manage by field, we make it a universal group, and we set up the notes field on it. So again, all these are just objects inside of the Active Directory integration pack. And finally, if they had selected any users, we would have added the users as initial users of this application. So if I go out, I should, in theory, be able to open up Active Directory. Here's where it gets dicey. Refresh. In theory, I should be able to go find GMI app SC Orchestrator Runbook Designer, and managed by should be Cindy Erickson. So it's created the group, would have set all the properties of it, and now it's on to creating all of the SCCM stuff. So if I go down, what do we actually create inside of SCCM? So we move the source files from our staging area to our production area. And then we actually create the collection, the package, and 2 programs. So, and again, these are just using integration pack objects. So we get the collection. If the collection already exists, we don't recreate it. If it doesn't exist, we create it, modify it to actually have the user group as a member, go out, create the package, right? So we create the package, move it to the correct folder, and then finally we create the program and this uninstall program. So the self-install program based on that, and the uninstall program based on the uninstall string from add and remove programs. And then finally, when all that's done, we notify our deployment team that, hey, there's something out there for you guys to go out and deploy. So let's see what that looks like. All right, so we can see that it's now in the deployment stage. So I can flip over to my deployment dashboard. There's actually 2 things in here because our deployment guys are at MMS. Normally, they're really quick at it, getting things turned around really fast. There's my request for the Orchestrator Runbook Designer. If I go in, I can go up here, and it tells them roughly how big it is, what version it is, all that good information. And it would suggest distribution points to push the application to if there were members in that group initially. So there weren't any members put into that group initially, so no DPs show it up here. Just for the sake of showing what that would look like, if I go over to the other one, I actually do go over to the other one. What this looks like is this, right? So there's 6 people at MGO. There's 4 distribution points associated with that site. So it's saying, hey, it should go out to these 4 distribution points initially. And then they click the button and it would go out. I will go back to mine and say, hey, even though it's not suggesting that it goes anywhere, I know that it should at least go to our 2 MGO distribution points. So I'm going to go here and say, select these 2 MGO DPs. And then they go all the way up here and say, deploy this to the selected distribution points. And now, wouldn't you know, it's going out and running yet another Orchestrator workflow. And it's going to go out and say, hey, which DPs did he choose? Okay, let's actually advertise this package, or let's actually target this package to those 2 DPs and start replication out to them. Once the replication is done, they can click the Create Advertisement button, and it'll advertise the self-install program to the collection, and it'll start showing up in our end users run advertise programs. So if I actually open up config-man, we should actually see all this stuff built inside of config-man, hopefully. So I refresh. I should be able to look for something like Orchestrator. So there's the Orchestrator Runbook Designer. If I open this guy up, it should have programs in it, self-install and an uninstall. Self-install should be configured how we normally configure it. Windows 7. I don't know what all the other stuff we set is. And if I look at distribution or package status, I should see that it is targeted at the 2 MGO distribution points. So then they come back to this UI. Realistically, they would wait until it actually did go out and click the Create Advertisement button. That'll actually sync everything up together, and it'll actually show up and run advertised programs for anybody inside of that Active Directory group. All right, so that is just a whirlwind run through the process that we created for packaging. So if I flip back to the PowerPoint, there's some learnings. First off, that wasn't a simple thing. It didn't get done in a day. It didn't get done in a week. Not to Joe's, my manager's thrill, it probably took, I don't know, more like 6 months. And it's not done yet. One thing that I've found is that there's constantly feature requests. Hey, could we do this? Hey, could we do that? Once you start doing this automation for a group, they very quickly realize how this can kind of change how they work. So scoping your project initially and delivering your solution in multiple phases is a really good plan. So my actual learnings. So the first thing, and if you were last year, you'll recognize this one, because it's still true. The first step and the hardest step is figuring out what it is that you want to do. What is the business process that you are trying to automate? So you can't put that on a whiteboard. You're not going to be successful in trying to do it. Getting everybody's buy-in on that and getting it documented, as corny as that sounds, is probably the biggest key to success. Once it's well documented, actually putting the workflows together, actually creating the UIs is relatively simple. If you don't get that well documented up front, you're going to be in request for new feature, change this, change that. Oh, you can't do that in our environment. Lots and lots of issues. Second, learning standardization is key to automation. If you're not standard, you're going to fail. If you notice in that whole request page, I think I typed maybe one thing. Realistically, it's just clicking through and accepting, grabbing a drop-down. Allowing users to enter data is kind of the bane of automation's existence. The more and more you can give them an option as opposed to a free-form field, the more and more successful you're going to be, because it makes your actual scripting later easier. Third point, modular workflows. Actually breaking these larger things like creating an SCCM stack or creating an Active Directory stack into smaller reusable parts helps you stay sane and helps other people follow your workflows. I don't know if you guys found it, but with organizing it the way we have, I find it very easy to follow both what I've done as well as other people in our organization. Our kind of litmus test is, can I give this to somebody else who has no idea what our runbook does, and can they at least follow it? Can they read the folder structure and understand, hey, this is the large things that it's doing. Okay, so I can dig into each one of these, and here's how each one of the small pieces work. That really is our litmus test and test one in our QA process for runbooks. Fourth, learning, extensibility. The product is really just a framework for code to run on top of, whether that code comes from Microsoft in the way of an integration pack or yourself or a third party, or if it's just a PowerShell script that you've had for quite a while. The tool really leverages itself to great extensibility inside of the Wintel family and even crossing into Unix, Linux platforms using SSH and other mechanisms. So really, if you think about it, there's not too much that it can't do. Just ask, what can .NET do? That's what Orchestrator can do. Finally, testing, well, probably not finally, but testing in QA is key. So a broken process that is automated is just going to be faster brokenness. Make sure that what you're doing is what you exactly want to do, because it's going to happen that way every single time. And then finally, I hope, is that we think that Orchestrator really is kind of where your process logic should live. I think there's a lot of value even in just taking all of the different scripts that we run across the company and bringing them into one place and being able to say, hey, here's the catalog of things that we deliver as an IT service has huge value. Then putting it through all the rigors of being QA'd also brings value. So with that, I will turn it over to Bhaskar from Office 365.
Just before we head over to Bhaskar, I really want to say thanks to Ryan. I'll hopefully give him a round of applause. It's just amazing, the type of work. You know, it's like we work in the engineering teams a lot, and we're kind of in the code just trying to make things better. And then we actually talk with a lot of customers like Ryan and others, and just to see what's possible. You know, it kind of gives us a breath of energy, and it's just great to see those kind of learnings. So hopefully it's a similar type of experience you have. But again, thanks, Ryan. So Bhaskar, we're now going to kind of go over into, you know, we have General Mills using Orchestrator, which we love, and a bunch of customers, but actually internally as well. We're kind of putting a bet on how Orchestrator is going to be used. And so Bhaskar from Office 365 is going to show how they're kind of bringing that into their environments as well.
Right. All right. Thanks, Eamon. Nice job, by the way, Ryan. All right. I want to ask a quick question, just by show of hands. How many people have heard, are familiar with Office 365, already using Office 365? All right. We have quite a few people here. So Office 365, it's basically the business productivity softwares that you are used to today, right? It's basically that now Microsoft is making it available on the cloud. So it's available for all sizes of businesses. It could be small companies from 1 to 5 people, it could be very large enterprise customers. So the great thing about having Office on the cloud is that, you know, it's the Office client applications that you are familiar with already, but guess what? All the servers that are behind the scenes are residing in the cloud, and Microsoft running them for you. When it comes to things like the security, when it comes to availability, when it comes to reliability, those should be taken for granted by the customers. It's Microsoft's responsibility to make sure it's up running all the time. So in essence, what do you get with Office 365? You get Exchange Online, you get SharePoint Online, you get Lync Online, and you also get Office Professional Plus, the client applications that you need to connect to these servers. So that's what Office 365 is about. All right, so I want to share with you the challenge that we have as we basically started to offer Office 365 on the cloud. And what I want to specifically focus for today's session is SharePoint Online. So SharePoint Online, we offer SharePoint Online for what's called a dedicated offering. The dedicated offering is being offered for very, very large enterprise customers. These are big brand companies. So we offer the servers, and then we also offer it to our ITAR customers. ITAR is nothing but the federal customers. So what happens is when we have these very large customers and we have these compliance regulatory things that are to be met for federal customers, there's so much of complexity, there's so much of requirements, and the expectation from these customers are the things that I'm used to having on premises, it better be there when I'm going to be moving to cloud, right? So that's on its own is a big challenge. So comes along with this is that you have now millions of users using the system today across all these big customers. And then comes along with this is in order to offer a dedicated service for these large enterprise customers, our team has to basically be running thousands of machines basically to serve these customers. So people familiar with SharePoint, we talk SharePoint in terms of farms, right? So we offer 3 farms for every one of our customers because it's a service on the cloud. There is a primary farm that's being offered. That's where all our users most of the time are residing. There's always standby. There is another farm which is as good as the primary farm that's located in a geo-redundant data center. That's the secondary farm. The third one is that SharePoint on its own is a large platform. It's got the breadth to it. It's got the depth to it. People can do a lot of development work. They can create lots of SharePoint customizations inside of SharePoint. So the expectation is, hey, when I move all this stuff to the cloud, guess what? I want to make sure there is a form of a development environment in the cloud as well, because I want to make sure the things that I'm writing are working in the cloud before I move it on to the production environment where my majority of the users are. So what we also offer is a pre-production environment on the cloud for our customers. And this particular thing about having a pre-production is important because later on, when I go to the demo, you will find that how the pre-production environment first gets used before we move on to the rest of the environments. So we have all this large footprint we have to be running, and we would hope that, hey, let's get this provision, and then let's let it be the same way, and let's not make any changes to it. But guess what? There is an equally compelling thing. That's why customers are excited to move to the cloud is that there's all kinds of change. One of the biggest changes when it comes to the SharePoint is that, people familiar with SharePoint, people familiar with the central administration, where you have all kinds of dials and knobs that you could tweak to basically have the farm run the way you want for your particular instance, right? So if I was to talk about farm configuration, the configuration at the web application level, I could go to the web application and I say basically, hey, I want to change the maximum file size upload that's going to be allowed for all sites under this particular web application. There could be things that I could go to a service application and say, hey, here are the configurations I want to do. Example, secure store service. I want to basically go and change the login password. I want to change the administrator. So those are just a few examples, but literally there are at least a few hundred such changes that customers could request, right? So that's one change. And guess what? If it's a change that happens every now and then, that's okay. But we expect and we see customers asking for these changes on and on and on. And that'll be one of the demos later on, which I'm going to show you. The next one is security updates, right? So no longer is it about Microsoft making sure the patched user is out there, it's available on Windows Update. Guess what? When we run a service on the cloud, it's our responsibility to make sure that as soon as the patch Tuesday comes out, there is a fixed timeline by when we need to make sure that every one of those boxes are on the latest and greatest patches. So there is again yet another form of change. So we introduced this change, but guess what? For customers, this They shouldn't be seeing any of these things. The service continues to run. Yet another change. The next one is the service updates. Again, no longer is it a notion of where software gets released every couple of years. It's a service. The expectation that there is capabilities being added on every few months, and the customers are expecting that, hey, it's a service in the cloud. Hey, I want more. Give me more. So every few months, there are changes happening. So, and the last one is platform updates. So when it comes to SharePoint, and for people familiar with SharePoint, there is a cumulative update that gets released every other month. So we want to make sure customers know, hey, that cumulative update, it's got the fixes I need. I need that particular cumulative update. It could be same goes with same goes with SQL, same goes with Windows. Could be service packs, right? So I guess the point here is that we have such a large footprint, and we want to make sure everything is fine and running, make sure that the SLAs are met. But guess what? There's changes that are being constantly introduced all the time. So the guess is, how do we basically have any kind of control over what we call as insanity? But it's like, otherwise we just can't survive, right, running the service on the cloud. So talking about the need, I want to make sure that this particular slide, I want to reiterate what Eamon had said a little earlier ago, right? It's really, it's about three things. When we think about things that have to be scalable, it's about, I need the ability to integrate. I need the ability to automate. I need the ability to orchestrate. Those are really, it's not just a marketing thing. It truly means that when we think about those are three big guiding principles, the needs that we have to meet in order to basically do something that's super cool and that's basically scalable in the cloud. So when we talk about integrate, right, a few things I want to talk about, and I don't know, this again was not orchestrated. It goes with what Ryan had to say, right? So when we create a framework, it needs to be extensible. It's not for a particular specific activity we're trying to do. It needs to be able to cater for a number of things that are needed in production. And again, it goes back to the point Ryan made. You need tasks, or you need activities that are very atomic in nature, because you create it once, it's out there like in a library. People can consume it on an ongoing basis. That's super critical, because that is one thing that we learned out of this thing. The next one is pretty obvious. We already have a huge presence of System Center, Virtual Machine Manager, Ops Manager, and so on. It was a slam dunk. You know what? It's Orchestrator, right? In terms of automate, there are things like, it's pretty obvious things that are very manually intensive, which are repetitive. You have to do it all the time. And then the last thing is orchestrate, right? The one thing I want to make sure that I talk about orchestrate is that being able to basically introduce change in your production environment in a consistent way again and again and again gives you so much of comfort. It gives you so much of predictability of how changes get introduced. That's a very, very important thing. Okay, so in terms of what I was trying to say, it was pretty getting obvious, right? Orchestrator is in the center of the things that are happening behind the scenes. It gets to a point that, we, behind the scenes, when we run this particular service, we need to have a service fabric, and Orchestrator is so core to this particular service fabric. So what I see in this particular diagram is, on the left side is the various types of changes that constantly are being asked, requested in these production environments. It could be configuration changes, could be updates, it could be even provisioning a brand new farm for a large customer. And then what you see there on the right side is that, hey, we're going to be introducing all kinds of automation. Guess what? There is thousands and thousands of configuration items that have to be input. So I need a configuration repository, a repository that stores all that information that I could go and talk to a service layer that's sitting on top of it, right, and get the data that I need, because that is what is going to allow me to scale. That's going to be a single stop shop. And at the bottom, what we have, again, since we run SharePoint on the cloud, it's all about SharePoint, right? We have basically the SharePoint customer farms. We have the object models available. So when it comes to Orchestrator, the cool thing about it is that when we talk about talking to all these systems, hey, we can talk to the service layer when it comes to the configuration repository. We can talk to other line of business systems. We can talk to the SharePoint object model. So that's the best part to it. All right, so let's now move on to the demo. Okay, so before I get started on this, right, so pretend this particular scenario where I'm not Microsoft, I am this customer, right, and I am the SharePoint administrator, and today I have a particular change. I need a particular configuration on the SharePoint farm. If what you're about to see does not exist. What's going to happen is that Microsoft is going to provide a change request form. You're going to fill in a bunch of information. You're going to fill all this. You're assured that somebody on the other side, Microsoft, is picking up all this information. There's going to be a couple of days somebody's working on it. And by the time this is all done, 2 to 3 days done, 2 to 3 people involved. I'm sure customers will bear with it, but guess what? It's getting to a point, Microsoft, we just can't scale this way because there is literally tens and 20s and 30s of customers coming and asking for changes all the time, and sometimes it's even couple of things even within a day, right? So it's getting to the point that internally for Microsoft, it is getting unmanageable. So what you see here, it's called the service administration. This is a SharePoint site. Guess what? We run SharePoint on the cloud. If we were to offer our customers some form of a self-service portal, it would be right inside the SharePoint site where they run it on the cloud. So what you see is customers get to this site. It's the same look and feel of any other site that they already are subscribed to, and it's going to be the SharePoint administrators who have access to this particular site. So what you can see here is that you could do a bunch of configuration. Could be at the web application, could be site collection, user profile, you name it. There's a lot of things one could do. So for our demo today, let's say I'm going to pick what's called the user profile. So we've found that this user profile properties and updates to it is a very high traffic area. Our customers keep asking for this so often. And so it's got a point that, hey, this is the number one thing that we have to be solving. And customers really are excited about what I'm about to show to you, actually. So this particular screen is basically, I am the SharePoint administrator, and this is a particular screen in SharePoint which basically gives you a view of all the profile properties that are available, right? And here is the place where I can go and make a request of what do I want to do. So you could add sections, you could edit an existing property, delete an existing property, you can move properties along. And if you're wondering where's all this showing up, if you, and again, I'm assuming people, you all have your My Sites in SharePoint. If you go to your My Sites, there's a page where you would basically go and say, look at my profile, or people want to go and look at your profile. So let me quickly show you that before I make this particular change, what I'm talking about.
I think the one thing to highlight here is you saw in Ryan's where he had his own custom portal that he had created to interact with Orchestrator. And the Nebraska is showing you basically on SharePoint how you could actually do the same type of thing and integrate with Orchestrator. And then even right out of the box with System Center, if you use Service Manager, there's built-in integration. And so you would actually be able to hook in directly there as well. So there's lots of different ways to actually drive those orchestration runbooks in your environment, as well as perhaps some third-party product you're using that you might be using for your help desk or service desk. So,
okay. No, that's a good point, actually. So this one is basically your profile page on SharePoint, and you can see things like your name, you could be about me, your picture, a bunch of stuff, right? That's what your profile is about. So this is the profile, so I just want to show you what the profile page looks like. Let's go back, and I want to basically introduce a particular change as the SharePoint administrator. Okay, so I'm here. So a couple of things I'm going to do, right? So let's say I want to add a new property. I'm going to here click Add Profile Property. Let me call it as MMS. Let's call the MMS property. I'm going to make a few changes to it. I'm going to say allow users to edit the values for this particular property. I'm going to show it on the edit detail page. And that's all I did. I did this. I'm going to click OK. And now I should see that there is a new field that's being requested called MMS. Guess what? It's at the bottom, and I think MMS needs to be at the top. I basically go here, and I basically choose this to be at the top. And so what it does is it basically bumps it up. And there's also, let me say that there's another change I want to introduce. I want to basically move the picture. The picture property is at the bottom. Again, I want picture to move to the top. And let's say I move to number 2. And so what's happening here is that you see these two properties at the top right now. It's just nothing has been submitted yet to the SharePoint farm. It's all out there. So what I do as a SharePoint administrator, I'm about to submit this particular change. It says yes, no, yes, I want to submit this particular change. So as this particular change is being submitted, what I want to do is quickly flip over to the Orchestrator box. I'm going to basically go to the management console. So let's quickly go to that particular box. Okay. And I'm going to basically click refresh here.
So what you're seeing here is talk a little bit about that operator view, this orchestration console we have, which is our web portal. So Ryan showed you basically inside the designer, and you can see how things are working. This is this view you can get if you're an operator in your organization to actually see what's happening in the environment.
Yeah, so I'm not going to beat this demo because this demo is going to be faster than what I can speak because that's the speed at which this Orchestrator runbook runs. So let me tell you what's going on under the covers.
But you can see it moving across.
It is moving pretty fast, and that's why I'm going to slow down, let it finish actually. So what's happening is when I was on that particular SharePoint page and I said submit changes, what happened was it was trying to track, okay, what were all the old values? What is the new values that are being requested? Which environment is this request coming from? Or for which environment is this request for? Which user is making this particular request? From what server is this call being made request? So all that information is being gathered, and that's what goes into initialized data. So once I get that particular data, that particular runbook, because by the way, I don't know if I said this, what's happening is a call was made to the Orchestrator web service. So once I get all this data, the first thing is because I'm running a service on the cloud, I have many customers making it. The first thing I want to say is, hey, is this request even coming from a valid customer? So what I do is first thing I try to go and check, hey, is this even a valid customer in my configuration repository? I go there to check, oh, yes, valid customer. Get me the customer code, right? Then what I do is I want to make sure that from here on, because I'm showing you what's happening under the covers, but guess what? In a real world, there is no human involved. These things are running all the time behind the scenes. I want to make sure that I have a great logging history. The next one a few things that I do is I want to make sure that there's a package that's coming telling this is the request for this particular customer environment. I want to make sure that I don't want to introduce in an automated way a change to a customer's environment unless it truly came from that particular customer. So I have to be super cautious to make sure, yes, indeed, this request was truly from that particular customer for their environment. So I do all those checks, and then I want to make sure that, okay, I have this information. There's an activity called decode environment. I want to make sure that, okay, for which environment is this request being made? I want to understand, is this a pre-production? Is this a primary? Is it a disaster recovery environment? And then once I have that, then I know that, okay, I know the number of environments where the change needs to be implemented. I now know how to loop through all those environments. So anytime when you try to make, again, this is SharePoint speak, anytime you try to introduce change, you have to use the central administration. So you need to know on which box in that particular farm is the central administration. Again, I go back to my configuration repository because that tells me, oh, for this particular customer, right, on this particular farm, here is where the central administration is running. So I get that particular information, I find what server runs it, I get the information, then I basically open up multiple remote PowerShell scripts, right? Because it could be more than one box, more than one farm where I need to be running it.
I think what's interesting about that is when we worked with the SharePoint team, you guys already had your own CMDB, basically,
yes,
which has all the configuration items in their environment. You know, and sometimes you can't just deploy everything. It's not like, here's System Center, deploy everything out and change everything. The one thing about Orchestrator I think you guys found useful was you could keep your existing investments. So they could orchestrate all those other things that they got, but then point to their CMDB to actually get the additional information back in. And that kind of just talks a little bit about the type of integration you guys could look at as well when you start to think about how could I actually orchestrate different processes across all the different systems.
Yep. And so the last few activities there is what's trying to do is, okay, I do this, I want to make sure everything I got back from the remote machine saying that, okay, it happened, it gives me a bunch of information, now I can go back and write even more detailed log on my machine to tell that, hey, here's what happened. And then I also have to make sure that I communicate back to the end users that, yes, this particular change. So I have to write back to the SharePoint Service Administration UI saying that, yes, the change has been completed. So before we go back and check that, yes, that particular change where I added MMS and I moved the picture to the top did happen, one thing I wanted to show you is that since we run something on the cloud here, right, we need to have a bigger perspective of all the things that are happening. Because it's not one customer. We have lots of customers, lots of changes. So what we had to build customers are basically a change history view, which basically gives us an idea of all the changes that are being happening. So one could come to this, again, now I'm being like an operations person who's running the service in the cloud. I want to see what's going on. On a good day, great, but on a day when something went wrong, I need detailed information of who requested for the change, why did it get stuck, give me additional information. That's why this particular change history /log is very important to us. So I could come here, I can tell by customer what are all the changes that happen in that particular environment. I can go and say, hey, very specifically, for example, the change that we just introduced, what were all the steps? And I want to say, hey, okay, found service in CMDB, give me a little more details about it. I can go and find more details. So that's something I wanted to say, is that's something which custom we did, which we found was a big request from our operations team, because they wanted to know, because they were fine that everything was self-serviceable, but I need a view of what's going on at any point of time. So having that audit, having that logging, having the change history was a big deal. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll go back. Hopefully the change took place. Let's go back to the machine, right? No, not that one, sorry. Okay, here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh this page. Hopefully if the change did go through, I should see MMS and the picture profile go to the top. Let's refresh and see what happened. All right. So, all right, I don't know. Okay, there was MMS. MMS is on the top. I wonder what happened to the picture profile.
So you didn't select the picture.
I didn't.
No, you hit the one above it.
Oh, is that right? Okay, I missed it. Okay, all right. Good observation. Thank you very much. So I missed that thing. Thank you for observing that.
It just shows it's real.
It is real. Okay. So I'm glad somebody was waiting for this to happen. Thank you. But at least, so this is the change that introduced, right? So let's do this. So what happens is that I'll go back to this other environment. So I go back here and I click it. Yeah, here we go. So what happened was that this particular type of change was only for a pre-production environment. Now I, as a SharePoint administrator, I have a comfort that yes, the change did happen the way I wanted, right? And then I come here and then I say, okay, that particular thing that happened in pre-production environment looks good. Go ahead and approve that in PPE environment. Once I do this, guess what? At this point, there's again exactly the same runbook, except the parameters are different. It says now blast this change both in the primary and the secondary farm. It's done. So this is how quick changes happen. So thinking about it, 2 to 3 days, 2 to 3 people working versus me having something self-serviceable, that's awesome. So customers really are very excited to have these kind of capabilities. And they don't care what's under the covers, but I'm just trying to show you the power that Orchestrator gives us for even a service that's running on the cloud or at such a large scale. Yep. Okay. All right, let's go back now. All right. Oops. Okay, my bad. Okay, so a few of these things, I want to say this was just not orchestrated. It's sort of, I put my learnings and I was like, wow, that's exactly what Ryan was for most of it saying. But that does make a point, actually. It does make a point, right? It means that these are things these guys have gone through in their learning. It really means something, right? So invest time to understand your business process. There are things, you have to sit with your customer. You have to sit with your operations team. There are SOPs, right? There are things that are here that are not in a paper or in a document. You better understand, because when you are trying to automate this end-to-end, you should definitely take the time to understand the business process. I talked about atomic activities, having atomic activities for reusability. Framework drives consistency, again, a point I said. Logging and auditing is mandatory. Logging, and I want to stress that fact, because once you are basically letting machine manage everything, right? Everything could be super cool, or something goes really bad. People are going to start panicking because now it's the scale. You're going to basically make a large scale impact. You better have a detailed logging. You better have an audit who basically made this change, especially when it's self-serviceable. The machine is doing, but the machine is doing on behalf of somebody. Who was that somebody who requested this change? Make sure to track that information, right? Focus scenarios that are high traffic. The last one there, right? Surface automation progress to end users, because now end users are very happy about this, right? Because no longer is it I'm throwing it somewhere the other side, somebody picks it up. But you also want to make sure that it's not quite real time, but give them an update that, hey, this particular activity is happening, right? And keep giving them an update. It could be good things, could be bad things. Give them an update, because that basically pacifies that something is happening under the covers. So keep updating them with the status. So I hope that was the last one. Let's see. Yes.
It is.
All right. Thank you
Awesome.
very much.
Again, I'd like to thank Bhaskar. I know we started working with them actually only a few months ago, really. Yes. And they've already done so much work to actually get this ready and get it out to their customers. That it just kind of shows what's possible. And so hopefully give them a round of applause as well, just for that presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, great. We just have a couple of minutes left, and actually it's my last slide. And so I think I mentioned those key takeaways around, how do you deliver self-service in your organization? How do you kind of bring it to the next level so you're delivering self-service from IT and your end users are consuming that? And so I think the goal, again, we've been iterating all the way through the different steps you have to do, but think about those 3 core capabilities around the integration, the orchestration, and then the automation in order to get to that self-service. I think the one key learning I would add, after Ryan and Bhaskar are talking, is don't try to solve the large things at once when you're using Orchestrator. Just start doing something small initially. I know, get used to it, get those early wins, get familiar with the product. You can see how powerful it can become when you invest in it, but you can use it for some very basic tasks right out of the box, and you'll actually get those returns, that ROI, very quickly. And then you can build up to some of these larger processes. So again, I want to thank everyone. We had a similar session last year. Some of yours were there where their fire alarm went off, and we had to clear the room with about 10 or 15 minutes to go. So it's actually nice to be able to get through it all. But we'd love to hear your feedback just on, are these the type of sessions you'd like to see? What went well? We'd like to really understand how we can make it better as we go forward. So again, thanks a lot. And if there's some questions, come up, or you can use the mics and we'll answer them. Again, thanks a lot, everyone.